to the Erica Show. I'm your host, Erica from Crypto Soul. The Erica Show is an effort to stay connected with the builders in this space, despite our current limitations. Through our Erica Show, we can hear from important industry leaders whom we have not seen or heard from in a while. So I'll speak that in Korean. 안녕하세요. 크립토서울 에리카입니다. 에리카쇼는 줌 인터뷰를 통해서 대표적인 프로젝트 리더들과 소통하는 기회를 제공하기 위해서 만들게 되었고, 오늘도 엄청난 게스트를 모셨어요. 소개가 필요 없는 이더리움의 비탈릭 뷰테린입니다. Today, I'm more than delighted and honored to introduce our one and only incredible guest, Vitalik Buterin. Vitalik, hello, hello.
Hello, Erica. Good to be here.
Awesome. It's been a while since we last met. I believe it was Stanford Blockchain Conference back in January.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
How have you been since then?
Pretty good. I mean, mostly just kind of staying in one place, just working, doing these virtual things, spending time with family, a lot. Yeah.
A lot has happened since for Ethereum as well, so I'm sure you're really busy. I first met you back in 2017 in Wanxiang Blockchain Conference. I don't know if you remember, it was like a long time ago. And then we met in Korea when you played with the Baduk match. Do you remember that as well?
Yeah.
Do you still play Baduk in the app?
I do, yeah.
Oh, you do? Oh, awesome. I'm sure you improved since then as well. And yeah, it's so good to be here. Thank you for taking your time to talk to me and the community. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm sure 99% of the industry knows you, but I'm sure there are certain people who are not in the industry yet, who don't really know who you are yet and what you created. So could you give us a short intro of yourself and what you're currently working on these days?
Sure. So I'm Vitalik Buterin. I'm best known as the founder of the Ethereum project. So general purpose blockchain. So kind of decentralized and open source and all of those nice things in the same way that Bitcoin is, except it tries to do a lot of things other than just running a currency. And so there's a lot of different people building a whole bunch of different things on top of Ethereum, and I'm sure we'll end up going into that quite a bit today. And I generally focus my time on kind of research, kind of coming up with future versions of the Ethereum protocol, a lot of different small things.
A lot of it was small things. Many people like short descriptions. Would it be possible to describe Ethereum in one single sentence? Would that be possible?
I think calling it a general purpose blockchain is already pretty close.
Okay, a general purpose. That's a very short sentence. That's good enough. Ethereum just celebrated its 5th birthday. Congratulations. Yay. So there are many core members who make Ethereum happen, like you and like Justin, Danny, and Xiaowei has been very active as well. How did you all come together? Because I think we're all curious how these geniuses or smart people came together and made something beautiful. What do you think? I mean, the community is very interesting. It's not centralized, but it's very powerful. So how did you come together and stay consistent over all these years?
Yeah, the Ethereum community has definitely kind of gone through a lot of different evolutions over the last few years. So I remember when the project started, it was just myself, and I first wrote the white paper. I first sent out the white paper in an email to a lot of my friends and some other people that I knew, published it a couple of months later, and people started replying back basically saying, hey, I want to contribute. And the first people replying back kind of basically just turned into the very early Ethereum contributors, co-founders of the project, and so on. And since then, there's been some people left, some new people joined, some people have stuck all the way through, and the Ethereum Foundation and the Ethereum community has definitely kind of changed a lot since then. But over the years, we've definitely kind of grown to have a very strong community. So people like Xiaowei and her team in Taiwan, I met most of them when I visited Taiwan. One of the first few times, I think it was in 2017. And then a lot of the other developers, the ones that are based in Berlin, I've known many of them since 2014 or 2015. And I end up traveling and going to these different places a lot, so I do get a lot of chances to normally to meet a lot of these people. And then Aya, our executive director, obviously, and have joined a few years ago, though I had seen her once before when I was writing the white paper at for the first time. I was actually working out of the same office as her, kind of very briefly.
Interesting. Oh, a long history.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think the organization has been staying very strong since, I think, over the past few years, and now it's very active now, more active than before. And so I'm very impressed at how you're keeping this like alive and strong. And so I was always impressed. So Modela testnet is running. Everything going smooth? Going well? Is it okay?
I think so. Yeah.
So are you? Yeah. Keep going, please.
No, just the Medasha testnet, as the Argentinians call it, because it's definitely going well in general. And there was that one bug that we had, one bug that caused a couple of other bugs that we had last week. But when you have a test network running with so many nodes in for the first time, that's the point of having a test network, right? And it's actually really good that we just discovered a whole bunch of issues at the same time, 1 week after the thing starts. And since that, even just in the past week, the Ethereum clients have improved a lot. The stability of the network has improved a lot. So a lot of things are very encouraging.
Awesome. There's a lot of Korean community participating in ETH 2.0. And there's a Korean community that I know that's promoting ETH 2.0 by making content, like local content named Kimchi Review. But it's still a relatively new concept to the Korean community. So could you give us an explanation of what it is, ETH 2.0, and how it's different from the previous version?
Sure. So ETH 2.0 is kind of the next major upgrade to the Ethereum protocol, and it focuses on two main things. So the first thing is proof of stake. So the idea behind proof of stake is that, so right now, the Bitcoin blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, a lot of these blockchains run on this consensus mechanism called proof of work, where if anyone can participate in kind of, gathering transactions, publishing blocks, and of helping the network come to consensus. But the way that we kind of prevent the network from getting spammed or prevent it from getting attacked is by making it kind of expensive to create a block by just basically requiring you to have a lot of computing power to create blocks. And so this makes attacking the network very expensive, but it at the same time means that the network is also very expensive to run because you have to keep doing all these computations. And proof of stake is an alternative way of solving the same problem, where instead of using computing power as the resource that you have to prove to determine how many blocks you create, you use coins inside of the same system. And so economically, it's kind of similar in a lot of ways. I'd even argue that it's more fair because with proof of work, you need to have these days millions of dollars in order to create an ASIC and participate in all of those things. But with proof of stake, the minimum for participating that we have now is about 32 Ether, and if you have even less, then you can participate as part of a pool. And so that's proof of stake, kind of more efficient, more environmentally friendly, I think more egalitarian, more secure consensus mechanism. And the other thing that we're focusing on in ETH2 is this idea of sharding, right? And the idea of sharding is basically that in current blockchains, every computer on the Ethereum network needs to process every block and every transaction that someone else sends. Right, so if you send a transaction on the Ethereum blockchain, my node has to process it, your node has to process it, every single person on the network's node has to process it, and this is very inefficient, right? And this is the reason why the Ethereum network can only support 15 transactions a second, and these days people really want to send much more than 15 transactions a second, and so that's why transaction fees have been getting extremely high. And what sharding does is instead of requiring every node to process every transaction, you only require a small portion of nodes to process every transaction. So for every block, you would say randomly choose a few hundred nodes on the network, and only those nodes are processing it and verifying it, right? So the idea there is that you get a kind of similar level of security because you still have many computers processing transactions. You'd still need to, it's still extremely expensive to attack the network and all of those things. But at the same time, because you only have a few computers verifying every transaction, the network altogether can process, many more transactions. Like instead of 15 per second, maybe 15,000 per second.
So scalable.
Right? So exactly, more scalable. Yeah. So Ethereum 2 is trying to take these two pieces, proof of stake and sharding, and basically implement both of them so we can use these technologies to improve Ethereum.
So if ETH 2.0 is launched finally, what would happen to the existing Ethereum platform?
So in order to make the launch of Ethereum 2.0 as safe as possible, we're doing it across several stages. So the first stage, what we call the phase 0, this is the launch of the Ethereum proof of stake network, the Ethereum 2 proof of stake network. And this is coming fairly soon, right? This is what we already have a testnet for, should be coming to mainnet in a couple of months. And we'll let that run for a bit. Then phase 1, we add in sharding. But it's like we don't have transactions yet, it's just sharding of data, right? So you can just upload data, but the data doesn't really mean anything yet. Then after phase 1, the next phase is we basically take the existing Ethereum state, so all of the accounts, all of the smart contracts, all of the information that the Ethereum blockchain is storing, and kind of move it over onto the ETH2 chain. Right? And what this does is it basically kind of transplants, the applications and everything that's happened kind of from the ETH1 engine into the ETH2 engine, right? And from that point on, it's the same applications, the same rules. You can send the same transactions, everything for a user just keeps going the way it was before, except instead of running on proof of work, it's running on proof of stake. And after that, we'll kind of fully enable the sharding and have much more scalability. So the idea is that phase 0, phase 1, then the merge, and then kind of phase 2 after. And this whole process will happen over the course of a couple of years. And so we'll have a lot of time to basically see and resolve any issues that end up happening.
Yeah, it's like a whole heart transplant. So it's going to take definitely a couple of years more. Awesome. Okay. So in the era of ETH 2.0, there will be a lot of validators, and there's a lot of professional validators, meaning like they do it as a job, like they have a whole team and they just really work on it full time. Is there any role that you expect from these professional validators who also take part in other chains as well? So not just Ethereum, but other chains. What's your opinion on these professional validators?
We're definitely expecting the ETH2 network to have a combination of many different kinds of validators. So we are trying to make the proof of stake mechanism kind of be as friendly as possible to people just validating at home on their own computers. And for example, I've been running a validator on this computer that I'm using to talk to you right now, and it's been on the Medasha testnet, and it's been working quite well. Yeah, that's very reliable. Now, of course, so we'll see a lot of people validating by themselves, and then we'll also see kind of more professional validators, especially for people who have large amounts of ETH, and they basically. In the way that we design the ETH2 network is that the more ETH you have, the more blocks you get assigned to. And so it's harder to run a node if you have more coins. And so if you have a lot of coins, then you would need to spend more time on a node. Or potentially you might end up kind of outsourcing that responsibility to someone else. And I know people are spinning up stake pools, people are spinning up kind of staking as a service. And those things are fine, though we obviously hope that not everyone ends up running ETH2 through one of those services.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we briefly mentioned sharding a while back, but if we were to compare the sharding between Near protocol and that of ETH 2.0, how would you compare it between the two?
There's definitely a lot of similarities. And I think the Ethereum kind of research community definitely pioneered a lot of the core ideas of sharding around randomly selecting validators, having different shards, having them talk to each other through a beacon chain and all. even some of the finer grained things, fraud proofs, data availability proofs, and some of these other kind of really technical buzzwords you would see if you start kind of browsing through all of our documents. And a lot of those ideas have definitely made it into Near protocol as well. A lot of those ideas have also made it into Polkadot as well, and a lot of other systems. I feel like the differences between Ethereum and Near, and there's definitely some at the kind of virtual machine level, and like basically what the part of the protocol looks like that applications and contracts have to directly work with. And one of the differences that I'm kind of feeling is that ETH2 tends to emphasize a more kind of simple and minimalistic blockchain, whereas Near tends to go for developer friendliness, even at the cost of the base protocol being considerably more complex. So I'm not sure how much the Near people would agree with that characterization, but that's kind of one of the ways that one of the differences that I'm feeling between the two. Otherwise, and there's differences between how kind of cross-shard interaction works. So, and in this sharded system, if you have a contract on one shard, then how can it interact with things on other shards? And there's a lot of little details, but in terms of just the kind of core philosophy, Near is definitely one of the more similar ones in that respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if you look at, for example, like EOS or Solana or kind of some of these other systems, like they tend to be very philosophically different. Like they don't even agree on like sharding, for example. They just say, oh, we should have a blockchain where you just need to have a lot of a big powerful computer to run a node, and if you don't, then you can't. And
right.
Yeah, that's something we believe in.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So we just touched upon another key concept, beacon chain, and you just kind of passed up on it. But so speaking of beacon chains, when the beacon chain is launched, validators have to burn like 32 ETH. And do you see this as like a pioneer's risk, or do you see like there should be some kind of hedging or insurance, because there's a lot of ETH, right? So
it is, and it definitely is a risk. So I guess just to be clear, like what's happening, right? The idea is basically that, as I mentioned before, the ETH2 system is launching first as a separate blockchain, and then there is this kind of merge, maybe later 1 or 2 years in the future, where we combine the two again into a single system. And so if you start off as an ETH2 validator at the beginning, then what you have to do is you have to send your 32 ETH on ETH1 to a contract. And from the point of view of ETH1, those coins are stuck, right? And you can't get them out. But then from the point of view of ETH2, you become a validator and you can validate on all of those things. So then as a validator, like you would be like you're basically stuck on the ETH2 side for whatever the period of time is until the merge happens. And when the merge happens, you would be able to get your coins out and use them again. So you are taking a risk that your coins are going to be stuck until basically the ETH2 roadmap gets to the point where ETH2 kind of comes back together with ETH1. And so there's definitely a kind of big pioneer component to it. We're definitely not expecting everyone to want to participate, right? Like we don't even want every single person to go become an ETH2 validator. Like we actually want to have relatively few validators at the beginning, because at the beginning there's more risk, and if there's more risk, then fewer people end up losing money if something goes wrong, and then more and more people can join over time as the system proves itself. So like the numbers that we've thrown out, like we're okay with something like 1 million ETH, which is basically like less than 1% of all Ether moving over to ETH2 and staking at the very beginning. And we're hoping for that to go up to maybe 10, 20, 30% when the ETH2 roadmap finishes. So it's your choice, and it's your risk, though on the other hand, it's also your reward. Like if only 1 million ETH is staking, then the annual staking reward, it goes up to something like 16% a year. So
yeah. Okay. There was some like, so I asked like a lot, I asked a question about like interviewing you, and the Korean community was very excited about it. So they asked some, I think, like fundamental questions. So let me share a few that I just kind of gathered among them. So they asked about multi-clients, and you mentioned a lot about them. Why do you see it as important? Why do you see it important?
Right. So the idea here is that Ethereum has this philosophy that we don't want there to be a single client, like a single software implementation of the protocol that everyone runs. We want to have a lot of different clients, and these clients implement the same protocol, and they can all speak the same language and talk to each other. And there were a couple of goals of this. So one of the goals of this, right, was like this was a reaction to kind of some of the things that I saw happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So, you know, the Bitcoin ecosystem does have this one really dominant client, kind of Bitcoin Core. And I mean, there are other implementations, but there aren't really a kind of serious efforts at kind of forcing the ecosystem to diversify. And there's even people who have the mindset that, you know, the code of the client is the specification. Like there isn't really there isn't a philosophy that, you know, you have the specification and the code just tries to implement the specification. Like there's some people who think that way, but then there's a lot of people who just think that the code just is the specification and the code is the code, and the code is kind of the definition of the protocol, which I disagree with. And like the experience with Bitcoin is that it ends up kind of putting a lot of power in the hands of one group of developers. And so, you know, this was my thinking in kind of 2014 when Ethereum started. And so we decided with Ethereum right from the beginning that we would encourage having multiple different clients, multiple teams developing these clients, and we would have this specification. So there's the yellow paper, like for example, that describes what the rules of the Ethereum protocol are. And there are the clients that implement it, right? So that the Ethereum definitely started out that way. Then in 2016, we had this big event. This was the Shanghai DOS attacks. This was when we were having DEF CON in Shanghai, right? And do you remember, like before the first day of DEF CON, very early in the morning, someone attacked the Ethereum network and made a lot of the nodes go offline, right?
Yes. I remember that.
So what ended up happening there, right, was that a lot of the time the attacks worked against one client, but not against the other client. And so like the miners and all the exchanges and the nodes could just switch from one client to the other. And because there was this kind of redundancy, and because there was no one client that everyone was forced to rely on, like that probably saved the Ethereum network at the time, right?
There was no single point of failure.
Exactly, no single point of failure. Like the two clients are designed fairly differently, so they have different risks. So the attacker could always only hit one of the two at a time. And so from then on, we started to also see the multi-client thing as this kind of big security improvement to the blockchain. And that's a philosophy that we've stuck with since then.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good example of like hedging. Awesome. And why do you think that quadratic voting is not used by projects within the, you know, this governance models? Because it's preferable, but it's not used. So why do you think that is?
I think one of challenges with quadratic voting in a blockchain context is that quadratic voting and any voting that's not coin voting relies on some model of identity. Like you have to distinguish between 10 actual people and one person pretending to be 10 people. And this is not something that's easy to do in a blockchain environment, right? Because kind of by default, everyone is anonymous and everyone just has, their public key. And so if you want to have a quadratic voting system, you need to have some kind of identity model and some kind of agreed upon way for people to prove that, their account actually is a unique person. And it's not just 1,000 accounts that are owned by the same person. And there are a lot of people working on this, but this is a challenging problem to solve, especially if you don't want to rely on a single central authority.
Okay. Cool. And some more curious about the layer 2 protocol. Could you give us an introduction on what it is?
Sure. So there's basically two different ways to improve blockchain scalability, right? There is layer 1 scaling, which basically involves modifying the blockchain protocol itself to be more efficient. So sharding is one big example of this. There's also a kind of more moderate examples of this. So like, for example, the Go Ethereum client and the Parity client and Netherminds too, like they've all become much more efficient over the last couple of years. And so they can process blocks many times faster than they could before. So that is a kind of short-term layer 1 scaling. Sharding is long-term layer 1 scaling. Layer 2 scaling basically says keep the blockchain the same, but change the way that you use the blockchain. So you need to use the blockchain less, right? So the earliest example of layer 2 scaling is this idea called a payment channel. And the idea of a payment channel basically is that, like, let's say I'm making a lot of payments to you, right? So for example, you might be an internet service provider. I'm paying for internet access, and I want to pay like every time I browse like 10 megabytes, right? So if you were to do this over the blockchain, then like I would have to send lots and lots of transactions to you, like one transaction every 10 megabytes, which could be a lot of transactions. So in a channel, here's what we do instead, right? First, I take some amount of money, and that amount of money, like it would be a bigger amount, like let's say it would be $100, and I put this into a smart contract, and the smart contract has a rule, right? And the rule basically is that if you can provide a message signed by me, so just an off-chain piece of data that has a signature where that signature is signed by me, and you take that piece of data and publish it and give it to the contract, then the contract like basically like waits for some period of time. And within that period of time, it basically like waits for you to send the like the highest value message that you have, and it gives you that amount of money, right? And then what I do is instead of making payments on the blockchain, I just send you these signed messages, right? So like let's say if I'm paying like 1 cent for every 10 megabytes, I browse 10 megabytes, I would just send you a message that says 1 cent. And then I browse another 10 megabytes, I would send you another message that says 2 cents, and then I would send another one that says 3 cents. And so these things are not transactions, right? They don't all go on the blockchain. They're just communication between me and you. No one else sees them. And then when you want to collect the money, all you do is you take the highest value one of these messages and you send it to the smart contract. The smart contract gives you the money at the end, right? So it's this kind of really brilliant technique that lets you have lots of payments, but with only 2 transactions on chain, right? One to join and one to leave. And then the Bitcoin Lightning Network, for example, is based on channels. So that's one example. And in Ethereum, we also have some more advanced layer 2 technologies. So Plasma is a big example. And like the OMG network has released that Plasma implementation. I think Tether moved on to it recently. And then rollups are another big example of this. So a lot of progress on layer 2 scaling as well. So, you know, the OMG network is running. There are state channel implementations that are running. There are multiple rollup implementations that are running. So a lot of good things happening there already. And I am expecting that we'll see more layer 2 scaling before things like sharding finish. But then when sharding finishes, we'll have layer 1 and layer 2 at the same time, which will just make Ethereum extremely scalable. OneSup is working on Ethereum as well. He's working on the layer 2 protocol, I believe. So yeah, awesome. So interchains are unavoidable topic. I think like it's Ether. What are your thoughts generally on interchains, and how do you see compatible with Ethereum and so forth? I definitely think that cross-chain communication is valuable. And it's really nice to have applications that can kind of jump across different blockchains. I think the main challenge with these systems is always the trust model, right? Like the challenge is basically that like if you have one of these bridges that tries to kind of prove what's happening on blockchain A to a smart contract on blockchain B, then how do you know that that proof is correct? How do you know that it's saying the right thing? How do you know it's not giving you fake information? And in some cases, this is easier. In some cases, this is harder. So one example of this, right, is that like the Ethereum blockchain can verify the Bitcoin blockchain, but the Bitcoin blockchain does not have a powerful scripting language, so it can't verify the Ethereum blockchain. And so like you can't have two-way communication between the two, right? And this is a problem because like recently there has been a lot of interest in these kind of Bitcoin wrapped tokens, right? So you have WBTC and you have RenBTC and all of these other ones. And what they often end up doing is like, because there's no way to make it fully trustless, like there's no way to make it fully smart contract based, because like you can't have Bitcoins on the Bitcoin side know what's happening on Ethereum directly. You need to rely on some intermediary to kind of publish that information, and that intermediary ends up being trusted. And if they get hacks, that could break the system, right? And I know like RenBTC is, I know, significantly better because they rely on multisigs, and you know, instead of trusting one participant, you trust the many participants. So that's like, that model is better, but like it's still far from perfect, and it definitely would be nice if we could have better models for cross-chain communication.
Yeah. There's ones like, you know, Cosmos, Polkadot just launched. So any thoughts on those two?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on those two chains as well, like Polkadot, Cosmos?
I know their models are a bit different. Like Cosmos is more about fully independent chains talking to each other. Yeah. Polkadot is more about people kind of living inside of the Polkadot world, and Polkadot kind of provides shared security for them. But the chains kind of define their own rules for how they process transactions. I don't know. And I think like one of the challenges of some of these models is that I think a lot of applications just kind of wants to be dumb and not do too much work, right? Like the reason why people love Ethereum is because you can just make a contract, and no matter how small an application you are, you can just publish yourself to Ethereum as a contract, and people can start using the application. Right? Whereas if for your application you have to build your own blockchain, the barrier to entry ends up being much higher. The barrier to kind of communication with other systems ends up being much higher. Like there's the barrier in terms of getting people to trust your blockchain has to be much higher. So there's like a lot more responsibilities that you have, and like I can see that being okay for some applications, but I also think there's a lot of applications that that's not going to be okay for. So I guess, yeah, it depends what you end up doing.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So these days, yield farming is like a huge keyword in this space. Yeah, it's become one of those things that everyone's talking about. Some say it'll become similar to trade mining. What are your general thoughts on the current status of DeFi? It's a little going crazy. It's explosive, and some are concerned about the hype, right? And so what are your general thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely crazy. It's definitely explosive. Like I think the thing that I'm basically concerned about is kind of sustainability, right? Like these days, you know, we have these extremely high interest rates that it's like 80% a year, 143% a year, whatever it is. And like the question you always have to ask is, where is that money coming from, right? And the answer usually is the money is coming from these projects that are just printing new coins. But these projects can't print new coins because, well, they can't print new coins forever, right? Because if they do that, then the value of their coin will just go to zero. So at some point, like the tap is going to run dry, and the interest rates that you can get from yield farming are going to be much lower. I guess the best thing that you can say is where, you know, if ICOs all end up failing, then people who participate lose money. As a yield farming, like I think it is going to kind of wind down and become less relevant over time. But when it does, like that's not going to lead to people losing money as much. It's like, oh, people were getting really high interest rates, and now people are getting low interest rates again. So it'll fail like kind of more safely, I guess, which is good. It's definitely an interesting way of kind of allocating and issuing tokens. Yeah, and I'm always definitely just happy to see a lot of different experiments, though I definitely also kind of hope that people can continue to be careful.
Yeah, for sure. I think a little, if you see too much on Twitter, it seems like, okay, this is a little bit overload. So I was a little concerned about the trends. So I think in Korea as well, I mean, in Asia in general, they're just like, what is happening right now? It's the bull market again, it's coming back, or yeah, it's just a little concerning sometimes. So just wanted to know your thoughts on that. I mean, there are so many dApps on Ethereum right now. It's become, the ecosystem is getting really huge, especially with the rise of DeFi, right? So is the upgrade of Ethereum core fast enough to satisfy the demand of the dApp ecosystem? Because, you know, yeah, there's so much going on. So if you, within the core team, do you see this as a problem or opportunity? How do you view that?
Like, there's definitely a big part of me that wishes all of this would have come 6 months later. Like, I think, you know, if it had come 6 months later, right, then we would at least have like optimistic rollups who would have more layer 2 scaling ready for these things. But now, like, there's a little bit of layer 2 scaling, but not enough. And so, yeah, there's definitely more demand than there is space for transactions, and this is why the fees have been getting really high recently. Yeah, but the layer 2 scaling is coming, the layer 1 scaling is coming, so I'm definitely very confident that it's just a temporary problem. Yeah,
awesome. So what are some projects that you're into these days? I was looking at your Twitter, and like, you tweet a lot. So, and you're into playing Dark Forest recently, right? What aspect of Dark Forest was interesting to you? What was your experience about it?
It's just interesting to see like a game that uses blockchains and uses zero-knowledge proofs, and actually kind of uses them well, right? Like, and also just the concepts that, you know, you have this kind of space, and space has been unexplored, and you have to kind of poke around and look for other planets. It's like, I actually found it quite fun, and the game mechanics were really interesting, and at the same time, you know, like, it does use blockchains for the right things. It uses zero-knowledge proofs for the right things. So I think it's just a great example of you know, what these technologies can be used for. Yeah, I think it's rare that they use zero-knowledge proofs for a game, because I think it's a rare thing to see, right? I mean, yeah, so that's pretty interesting to me. Okay, so many of you know you for Ethereum, but, you know, I do want to know more about your personal side as well. I'm sure you have a personal, you know, life. What do you do? Like, what's your hobby? And like, what do you do during your free time? Because I know you like to hike sometimes. I do.
Yeah?
Yeah, no.
What are you usually into?
I go on walks every day. I read things. Definitely read a lot of different things.
Non-blockchain related as well, right?
Some blockchain related, some totally not blockchain related, yeah.
But I mean, due to COVID, we can't really like exercise a lot outside, so it's been a little, yeah.
Well, you can. Like, you do need to wear a mask though, like, you know. Right, which I guess makes running harder, but walking is fine. You know. That's true.
Yeah. Okay. You're huge, I guess, influencer. I guess you don't really, take that, like, influencer is a big word, but it's like the words you say on Twitter does get retweeted a lot, and it does, you know, catch the attention of a lot of the community people. Do you ever feel like burdened by that influence? Because like sometimes like it gets like on a press release, like they print it out as like an article, media article, and do you sometimes get like burdened by that by any chance, like stressed out or anything?
Definitely. And like, there's definitely times when I say something and, you know, it turns into an article, and like Cointelegraph completely misrepresents it, as they always do. And
yeah, the life. Yeah, it must be difficult. Do you always have to clarify it? Do you have to always clarify it, or do you just like stay silent and then? I mean, kind of...
sometimes I clarify, sometimes I ignore. It depends on the situation. No.
If it's urgent, then you do have to clarify it. Yeah, it must be really stressful because like, yeah, I totally, because like, it's been a while. It's been like 5 years, 6 years since you've been on the, the project, and it's not easy job to be consistent and like, yeah, and you're still young and you're not like, yeah, so it must be, I always felt like, oh, you must be really stressed and like burdened because you're just a normal person, and so I just wanted to know how you felt about it.
Yeah. I definitely try my best to stay sane.
Yeah, it's a very important thing, right? To be like mentally just like really focused and sane, consistent. It's very difficult. So kudos to you. Yeah, so I think we're almost done. Let's talk about the next one. So the bull market is currently here, and although it is here, I think many people leave the industry, have left the industry. They felt uncertain about the possibilities of the technology, and I think it's been a bear market for some time. So I think that during that period, a lot of people left, right? So as an industry leader, how do you see the future of blockchain technology? Can you give us some, words of conviction and, some, I don't know, hope, I guess, for the community?
I actually think that kind of adoption of and blockchain technology and the ideas around blockchains and all of those things has been going really well the last couple of years. Yeah. Like, one of the things that I watch for is, are we seeing adoption from communities that are just completely separate from, the blockchain community itself? Like, are we seeing any evidence that, Ethereum is being used by people other than the Ethereum community? And it's actually just in the last year that I've been starting to see a lot of signs that it really is, right? So, like, one example of this was I was just randomly browsing this website that was, it was someone on Twitter who's totally not part of the Ethereum community linked me to an article about Nigeria. I think it was about like writing systems in Nigeria, and I read this article. And at the bottom of the article, I saw, hey, this article just actually has an Ethereum donation address, and it even has an Ethereum-based commenting system. And I was like, wow, I just like saw Ethereum in a totally unexpected place. That's one example. And another example is I was browsing like some subreddits, and one of the discussions. Like there was, I think, some discussion about, I think, either politics or something else, and someone just linked to a prediction market on Omen, where Omen is, of course, a prediction market and a platform that's built on Ethereum. And so, like, those were the two most recent cases. But I think there's definitely more and more people just, in the wider world than our own world, and of recognizing that Ethereum-based things are useful. So there's, yeah, it's definitely making a lot of progress in that way. Like I think there's a lot of people who are just realizing the importance of these kind of neutral base layers that applications can get built on, and there's also a lot of this kind of growing concern around centralized systems and corporations having power, and then the governments of the countries those corporations are based in, like ending up having power, and sometimes they get taken over by a crazy guy, and yeah.
You know who? Yes.
Yeah, so it's I think a lot of people do kind of increasingly see the need for decentralization as an alternative, and there's a lot of people that do see the need for kind of some kind of platform, technology, whatever, to kind of help keep the world connected, essentially. And yeah, I feel like Ethereum in the space in general is making a lot of progress.
Yeah, I totally agree. The global trend is, I think, unexpectedly, it's been going towards the favor of this distributed technology. And there was a Twitter hack, that was a big one. Yeah, I think the need for such technology is definitely getting it's increasing. And so, yeah, I really agree with your message. Thank you. And lastly, can you share a short message to the Asian or Korean community who have not seen you for a while? You know, they miss you and they want to, you know, they want to be involved with the community. They're interested. So can you share a short message to them?
No, and first of all, you know, like I've definitely been following a lot of the work that you know, the Korean community has been doing, and I know OneSub has been working on as in CK Opru, and that's and I saw that's been making a lot of progress, and I know, you know, the Korean developer community has generally done a lot of great things, and in other Asian countries as well. And we have you know, an increasingly strong community in China. We have a team in Singapore. There's you know, Xiaowei in Taiwan has been leading, and there are, along with the very strong meetup organizers. So there's a lot of people who are just working hard at building up the Ethereum ecosystem, building on Ethereum, helping to just explain to their communities what's going on. And I think that work is really valuable. And I think both myself and other people in the Ethereum Foundation have definitely been kind of closely watching, and we definitely really appreciate all of the work that all of you guys are doing. So I definitely look forward to visiting Korea and seeing everyone next whenever that becomes possible again.
Thank you so much. I'm in Saigon, by the way, Ho Chi Minh City, and recently there was a Ethereum in Saigon community that just launched by some of the community teams here, and COVID just hit, so we just couldn't maintain the next meetup, but we just had like really small meetupups since then, so it's been recent, but I think it's gonna slowly grow, and also Korea's always been strong. So
I know the Ethereum community in Vietnam I know is strong too, and I think Kyber, though they're based more in Hanoi, right? So no, it's still definitely hope that things there keep going well as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. Do you remember how to say thank you and goodbye in Korean? Do you remember the Korean?
감사합니다. 안녕하세요.
Oh, awesome. And 감사합니다. 안녕히 계세요. I hope to see you in person soon, and thank you so much for the long interview. And stay healthy.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.